and welcome to this week's episode of Not D&D. I'm your host, Jessica, and joining me this week we have a returning guest that I did not scare away last time. She puts the drama in llamas. We have Eva Burke back with us from Button King Games. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me. Yeah, you didn't scare me away. It was lovely to chat to you last time, and I'm sure it'll be just as nice this time.
Well, excellent. Well, we're here to talk about your upcoming game, which is coming out on Kickstarter tomorrow, Jude's World. So we'll talk about that. I'm very excited about it. Again, the artwork aesthetic grabbed my attention, just like Drama Llamas. Really strong vibes here. Before we dig into that, in the last episode when you were here in November 22, we talked about your history and how you got into tabletop games. So we've already covered that. So if people want to know about that, go listen to Drama Llamas. But I wanted to ask you today what your gaming highlights were in 2023 and the first half of 2024. So any particular games you've enjoyed playing, or what have your gaming highlights been?
Okay, gaming highlights. I got to run Orbital Blues finally, which I had been dying to run for ages since I read the rulebook, which went really well. I even kind of want to publish the adventure I ran as like a little supplement thing, but I'm trying to focus on one project at a time. But that, watch this space. So I really enjoyed that. Just a one shot, unfortunately, but it does make me think I might like a longer campaign. And also I've kind of gotten involved with the sort of indie community more since we last spoke, and kind of met more fellow designers and got to play their games. My friend George from Three Sail Studios has a game called Mappamundi coming up, which I was running playtests for at UK Games Expo. So that was definitely a highlight. That seems to be going really well for them, and it's a great concept. It's kind of like an ecology based zero combat exploration RPG about documenting monsters that might disappear from the world. There's like an unmaking event happening, and you have to find these monsters and learn about them. So that's looking incredible. So that was really great, and great to be able to support them. UK Games Expo was great fun, intense as always. I worked on the tabletop industry networking stall there as well, which is this networking group that we've gotten together. So watch this space on them. And if you're a designer, please join the networking group, because it's great. We're just supportive of each other, playtesting each other's stuff. So that's wonderful. And they have a Patreon. So I have to shout that out. Let's see. I think I've got exciting things upcoming. Later this month, I'm going up to Scotland to play Kids on Bikes with some friends, which I'm really excited to try, because that's been the basis for a few Dimension 20 series now, and seems like a really cool system. So I'm excited for that. And I've got a couple of other like indie games, just like small zine-sized things that I've picked up that I'm excited to try as well. So lots going on.
A lot going on. That's awesome to hear. And of course, the big project I imagine has been Jude's World. So, like I said, coming out to Kickstarter tomorrow. So I imagine the last month has been getting ready for that. But for folks that haven't heard of it, obviously I'll put the link in the show notes and in the chat, so you can click through and take a look and be notified what time it launches tomorrow. But for folks that haven't heard about it yet, what's the blurb? What's the intro? What's Jude's World about?
So it's a solo journaling game, making use of a tarot deck, so tarot based. And it's a sort of coming of age story wrapped around a love story. So it's the story of, you take the role of a 12-and-a-half-year-old preteen who just found out that their parents are breaking up. And you have decided that you're not just going to stand for that, you're going to try and bring them back together. So very Parent Trap. But it's kind of the Parent Trap with a bit more nuance to it, a bit more based in the real world. Not completely, but actually trying to deal with a bit more with what does it actually mean to try and get two people back together, and how likely is that to work, and what would happen if you tried that. So it's kind of like I've been saying, it's both an homage to and a critique of those styles of stories, aimed at being an exploration of a relationship that is ending, and also an exploration of a 12-year-old's perspective of that experience and the things they can learn from that, and the ways that they can grow through that.
That's a really interesting perspective, because like you say, like going through a breakup, even as adults, it like processing and understanding that is like really complex. But when you're 12 and a half, it's a different perspective. And also they're your parents as well. So there's this other layer of, because I think there's an age, maybe that I don't think it's 12 and a half necessarily, where you start seeing your parents as people. They're not just these parent beings. Yeah, they like start becoming individuals. So that's really interesting. So let's talk about the inspiration and the philosophy of the game, because like you say, it's a little bit more nuanced. Like you've mentioned Parent Trap as like a reference. What other references and inspirations did you use for making the game?
So the initial inspiration came from playing this co-op game with my husband called It Takes Two, where everybody knows it. It's a great game.
Great game,
but it's another one of these stories that's about, you know, this, and it is played for comedy in the game, I believe. This kid who's about the age of my protagonist decides to transform their parents into dolls, and then they have to work together with the help of a sentient self-help book to escape from that situation. And I played it, I enjoyed it. I haven't finished it yet, but I really enjoyed playing it. But it did get me thinking about these sorts of stories of a kid who wants to push their parents back together. And it really, like, I find them slightly jarring, honestly. As a child of divorce myself, I never, as a kid, wanted my parents to get back together. And even if I had, I don't think I would have had the kind of gall and the gumption to be like, this is my job to put these two back together. So I'm just fascinated by these stories. Like, who is telling them? Who are they for? What is the messaging? And I think there is quite a cynical kind of take on it that's a little bit, not to besmirch It Takes Two, who I understand had a bit more nuance in their narrative, but certainly the Parent Trap, there's kind of this slightly conservative undertone of, you know, you should stay together at all costs. And that's, you know, keeping a marriage together is always better than a divorce, which I don't agree with. I, you know, personally think divorce is a human rights issue. It's definitely a women's rights issue in lots of parts of the world. We are fortunate to have access to it. And I think it's not so much about whether you break up or not when there are kids involved, but how you do that, how you go about that, and how everybody handles themselves. So I think I wanted to do a way more nuanced take on that. And then I wanted it also to be fun. So it has lots of touch points and references for things that I grew up with at that age, you know, particularly things like Clarissa Explains It All, where you have this sassy, you know, cool preteen protagonist who speaks directly to you and you kind of want to be that person a little bit. So just a little bit of that tone. And a little bit of sort of Secret Diary of Adrian Mole kind of thing, because you're writing a diary and it's got that layer of kind of comedy, irony. You know, you are writing as this child who thinks they know best, but you, an adult, know that there's no way that child knows best. They are being chaotic, they're being messy, but they think that they're the only adult in the room. And I think there's something innately quite funny about that. So yeah.
Absolutely. That sounds really great. What can you tell us about Jude, the protagonist that we'll be playing as when we play the game?
Everyone's Jude is different, is the intention. Everyone's Jude. Everyone has their own Jude. Character creation is kind of this quite simple process initially, where I made, like, you know, those memes that go around that are sort of A to Z lists, and it's like, look up your initials and you are the two things.
Oh yeah,
or,
like,
you know, look up your date of birth, or, you know, things like that. So I have two A to Z lists, and one is like full of sort of nouns, and one is preferences. So you could be a punk who loves movies, or a horse girl who gives great advice, or a pop princess who's addicted to spicy food, if you look up these initials, and that's your first initial character creation. And then I have a much more involved process using the tarot cards to build up a special house-shaped spread that guides you through answering questions about this family, who they are, how they came together, what things they've been through together, so that by the time you move on to the next bit of the game, which is actually writing about these people, you have an idea of who they are. You have like this headline of who they are from the meme, but you also have a more in-depth dive into that through the tarot spread that you've done and the questions that you've answered about them. So
sorry,
it's intended to be different for whoever runs it, and I think
I guess that makes it replayable then as well, so you can have different takes
for
on
sure
it.
I mean, I've play tested it upwards of 7 times myself, and every single time the parents are different. They have different genders, they have different careers, they have different relations to each other, they came together in different ways, there are different things pulling them apart. And Jude, to be fair, my Jude is usually pretty consistently who I probably wished I was when I was 12, you know, kind of like precocious and sassy and confident, but, you know, also not without a few problems in school and things like that, just to keep it interesting. But yeah, I think, it is intended to be replayable in that sense.
Nice. And with the outcome of the game, is it predetermined, or is it different in everyone's games? Like, it's
different in everyone's games. Jude has 2 goals, you are instructed. One is to get their parents back together, and the other is to grow into a successful teenager, whatever that means to them. So you have stats that you track throughout the game. Through the game, you create the initial tarot spread to describe who these people are, and then you sweep that away and you spend the rest of the game rebuilding that spread. So it's kind of, to Jude, this is kind of a huge, slightly cataclysmic event, but through the game we will rebuild this solid foundation of a life out of the experiences that they have during the game. And as you go through and have these experiences, you can choose to do a trap, which is bringing Jude's parents together and seeing if you can rekindle their romance. And that involves a roll, which can be success, fail, and impacts a couple of stats about where that relationship stands. And then the other option is to choose twists, which are events in Jude's life, you know, standard milestones of being a 12-and-a-half-year-old, like first crushes, first BFF, you know, first time that you fail a class in school or something. Lots of different milestones, kind of. And those impact the other goal, which is this teen stat that you have, which shows you how far along Jude is to becoming a teenager.
Wonderful. And what's the structure of the game? Because like we've got our goals, like you say there. We've made our character, so we've got all the tarot deck out, made our character. We wiped that away because it's symbolic of our world is ending. We have to rebuild it. So what's the structure of the game? What do are there turns? Is there act structures? Like, what does it look like?
It's a pretty simple play loop of you draw 3 cards at random from your tarot deck, and you pick one to keep and put the other 2 back at random spots in the deck. And depending on what card you choose, that could mean several different things for your story. Like some cards map to characters coming into your story who might be a help or a hindrance to your goals. Some map to keepsakes, which are these sentimental items that Jude finds around their family home that you can customize to your own story, which basically give you clues about the parents' relationship and what happened here. They help you explore the history of the parents' relationship. And then, so the major arcana in the tarot deck all map to potential milestone life events, what we call twists in Jude's story. In order to do a trap, you have to sacrifice one of these major life events. So it's this sense that Jude's 2 goals are always in opposition to each other. Like this, they can either be focusing on their own development and their own teen experiences, or they can be obsessively trying to get their parents back together, but it's hard to serve both goals. So at the end of the story, you might have a situation where Jude has maxed out their teen stat and becomes a successful teenager, or you might have a situation where the parents are back together. You might fail both goals, you might succeed in one and not the other. It's very hard to succeed in both, I will say.
Yeah. Oh, but possible in theory?
In theory, if the dice rolls and the maths is all on your side, then yeah, if you have a lightning streak of, it's, you know, to check whether the trap succeeds, it's like a 2d6 system. So if you roll double 6s, throughout the whole game, then maybe.
Okay.
But
all right.
yeah.
Something to play for them, maybe. So you can have that optimistic, youthful ambitions about it. It's like, yeah, I can do everything. It'll be fine.
Well, totally, that's a theme, right? You know, I can totally have this well-rounded life and also be so focused on trying to sort my parents out, you know? I think there comes a point in most playtests where you kind of have to decide which route you're going. Like, are you doubling down on getting the parents back together, or are you doubling down on Jude's focusing on themselves? And I think that's intentional, you know?
What in playtests have people tended to do? Have they tended to go one way, or has it been a real mix of what they focused on? Or
I think it's been a real mix, and I think people realize that, because I don't necessarily prime them with how difficult it is. Like, I just let them go in cold, and they are like, I didn't manage to get them back together, so you know, and I'm like, that's okay. Like, kind of the idea of the narrative is not necessarily like that your story ends with Jude really upset if their parents don't get back together. I think the point of the narrative is to explore the relationship and come to a point of acceptance with whatever the outcome is, right? It's I think the real story is how Jude as a character is processing these events, and how the things that they learn add to their picture of this, and how it helps them become how it helps them understand the world.
Yeah. And how kind of long does the game take to play? I know solo games, you can always do a bit here and there if you want, or sit down to play. Like, is there a set number of turns or amount of time?
There isn't a set number of turns. There are 9 positions in the spread that you're creating. So once the 9 positions are filled, the game is completed. So it's very much up to you, because on every kind of draw of the cards, you can choose to do a trap, you can choose to add a twist to the story, or you can choose to pass and write a diary entry about Jude going bowling or cutting their own hair or having just a standard teen experience. This kind of a table that I've added with a bunch of, you know, prompts for those downtime type stories. So you could like take it leisurely, you know, not be always so drama and mission focused, and take 10 plus hours playing this game. Or I think it would come back down to maybe like 4 if you were super focused.
Okay. And we mentioned kind of there's that nice exploration element you mentioned of finding like items, and we get kind of glimpses into the parents. Could we hear a little bit more about that? Like, do you have any examples of ones you've had in games?
So yeah, the keepsakes, a lot of the minor arcana cards in the tarot deck map to these keepsakes. And what you will get when you look them up in a reference table is a very simple description, like a chipped mug. And then there'll be a question that goes with it that says, whose mug was this, and what does the message on the side of the mug say? So you have to customize the item and personalize it to your story. I had, in one of my playthroughs, Jude's parents were 2 lesbians who were obsessed with horses. They met each other at a stable, and they were both obsessed with horses. So all of the items were horse themed. Like, one of the keepsakes they found was a crystal animal, and it had to be like, who gave this to who as a gift, and what animal is it, and what does that signify? And of course it was a horse.
Of course.
So yeah. So yeah, the keepsakes initially are just kind of knick-knack items that you might find in anyone's house, but then they come with questions for you to develop it and turn it into something that feels personal to these characters.
And one thing I do want to talk about as well is the artwork that you have in the games, and your kind of the approach you took with it, and who the artists are. So please talk about how pretty the game is.
Yeah, I found this artist named Mega Acelia. Her name will be on the Kickstarter if you want to find the spelling and Google her. I kind of just, my approach with artists is to like pull together a whole load of reference material, and I have this kind of Jude's World mood board that has a load of 90s stuff and like patterns and things, and just sent that over and said it needs to be a young person in their room writing in a diary, and this is kind of the inspo. And that's all I had to do. And this incredible artist came back with this cover. Like, and I just, no notes, absolutely no notes, perfection. I knew from the style of their work and the energy in it and the colors in it that they were going to nail it. But yeah, so I'm just absolutely thrilled. Can't wait to see it in hard copy in the books that I'm going to be sending out and everything. So yeah, internal art is yet to be seen how well the Kickstarter does, because it's quite a small book. It's quite a low price point, so not to get too businessy, but you kind of have to see what your margins are, because I would always want to pay an artist a fair rate for their work. So yeah, we'll be seeing. There may be maybe some more depending on how popular the Kickstarter goes.
Amazing. Well, let's talk about the Kickstarter now. So what so how long is it going to be running, and yeah, how much is it to pick up a copy?
So the Kickstarter will be running for 30 days, so starting 13th of August, tomorrow, and ending 12th of September. A physical copy of the book is, I think, going to be about £12, and then digital only $8. There will be also a tier where you can get a physical copy of a companion workbook that I've created that lets you track all of your keepsakes and all of the characters that you find and write your diary entries and everything. So that will be slightly more, so probably about 15. But yes, there will also be a retail tier for those who have stores that they want to stock and things like that. But yeah, it's not a crazy expensive book. Yeah, it's a comfortable level, I think.
And where are you at in terms of a development process? Because obviously it sounds like it's pretty far on. So in terms of if somebody backed this, when could they expect to get their PDFs and their books?
I'm expecting to deliver before the end of the year, so December, but that's giving myself some lead time. Essentially, the game is written, it's not edited yet, and layout is the big piece to do, which, of course, will take some time. There will be a full timeline written on the Kickstarter when it goes live, so people will be able to see when I expect to deliver things, and of course I'll be keeping everyone updated on how I do against that timeline. But yes, December is the intended delivery month before Christmas.
Fabulous. And this is your second crowdfunding now? Is it second?
It is, yes, my second. Drowned Llamas thankfully succeeded.
It was the first.
Yeah, so yes, I'm back with something a little smaller this time. I felt like working on another solo game. I've had success with a solo game before with Bumbling, and I do enjoy the kind of meditative nature of them. So yes, but I think I'll probably swing around next project and do another group game. I think I'm probably going to alternate for the foreseeable, but yes, So this is a smaller one, a smaller goal, but we'll see how we go. I mean, it's not in Zine Quest month this time, so I'm, you know, it's going to be a little less traffic going on, I think. But we'll see how we go.
Quite possibly. So it sounds, is there a difference when you're designing for group games versus solo games in your approach? Like, because obviously when they're being played, it's a different vibe. It feels very different. Is that the case when you're designing as well, or is it a similar process? Okay.
I think, I mean, the thing with group games is it's so much more complex because there's so much more balance to think about, and also it's, let's see, you have to think about a lot of things interpersonally, like safety and how do you ensure an agreed upon tone for something, whereas for something solo, you can kind of give it to somebody and say, I suggest this tone, but it's between them and their game how they want to play it, really.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's the same with a group game in the sense that a group could choose to take a game in a different tone, in a different direction to what the author intended, but you need to, I think, give people guidelines in how they're going to, you need to help people reading the game as a document understand the intended tone so that they have a starting point for them to come in at the same point. I think it's very different. Playtesting is harder with group games. You have to just simply practically you have to find more people. But also I think actually, yeah, it's harder in some ways and easier in others. I think more people gravitate towards group games, and even if you play a group game that is a bit rough around the edges, you're probably going to have a pretty good time if you're playing with people you like. So there's that. Whereas solo games, people have to set aside time privately on their own to play them, and there are people who are good at that and people who don't do that so much. It feels like it's a smaller subsection of the hobby that are into solo games. So it's harder to find that kind of group of people who are very passionate about these. So yeah, there's a lot of differences and a lot of differences in design and approach. I was able to quite quickly iterate on this game and noticed, friction points and things that didn't work, because it's faster to test myself. And I can choose to test myself. It's less ideal, but I can. Whereas group games, I absolutely obviously can't. So it's, much harder to get that tight loop of, oh, this isn't working, change it. And also, yes, with group games, you have to rely a lot on other people's feedback, which it is a real skill to be a person playtesting somebody else's game and giving useful feedback, I think. Not everybody is comfortable with it. You get a lot of people who are very happy to play your game, but then their feedback will be, it was great. And you'll be like,
cool.
What wasn't great? I need to know what wasn't great. And people are like, no, it was great. And it's like, you're so kind and you're being nice, but like the critique is the gift here. Like, this is what we need. And that's hard for people, I think. Whereas for me, playing my own game, I'm very happy to be overly critical.
Yes, absolutely. No one will ever be a bigger critic than yourself, I think, with your own work, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, blind spots aside, obviously.
Well, yeah, there's that. Well, one thing you mentioned is about that solo TTRPGs, there is like a smaller subset of the tabletop gaming space of people that are interested in that. So if somebody is watching this and they haven't tried any solo TTRPGs before, but they're looking at this and they're like, do you know what, this is my vibe, I might give it a go. What could they expect from a solo TTRPG experience for their first run through of it?
I think it obviously depends on the game. I think with a lot of solo RPGs, they are, if a game is designed to be played solo specifically, I think you get a lot of games that are very kind of designed for very meditative experiences. And you also get a side that's designed for horror. There's a lot of horror in genre stuff. And that's, obviously designed to invoke this feeling of, oh, you're alone and it's you against whatever. I think, but this game and others like it, I think the expectation is that you are getting into some creative writing. You're kind of telling yourself a story and a narrative for your own satisfaction. And that can be quite, as I say, it's like a meditation. It's like you can go quite deep into a flow state of playing these games if they're designed for that. And I think it's good for the soul, honestly. Not everybody likes to write, but I think for those who do like to just journal, even for their own life, or write letters to people and things like that, I think these sorts of games provide a little quiet oasis away from hustle and bustle. They kind of are an antidote to overstimulation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you're saying about people that love writing, definitely that's a huge pull for people. I stayed away from solo RPGs for a long time because I don't enjoy writing, because I'm dyslexic, so it's an effort. But then I kind of realized, I gave myself permission, I don't have to write it down, I can record it. I can just speak it. And then and that's it. I haven't found a solo RPG that makes a difference or breaks the game. I've yet to find one where the writing is the thing.
That's absolutely
so
fair.
You can absolutely do that, and you can make it like a little 90s video log type thing, which would have been on a camcorder at home that you edited. So you could even do it in that style if you wanted as well.
I love that idea. Honestly, I did think about doing like a recorded sort of run through of one of my playthroughs where I like read out the stuff that I come up with, because I do feel like that's easier for other people to engage with in terms of like showing how the game is played. But thank you for that suggestion. That's a great idea, actually. I hadn't even thought. Like, yeah, I mean, it's very easily done with this game, I imagine, and would be probably great fun to play that character being like bratty into a microphone, you know.
Yeah, especially people if they're into the narrative side of RPGs, that they like playing the character and the voices and things like that. That would definitely be a big thing. But but I wanted to bring that out for people because I know so many people are hesitant about trying solo RPGs, and I was one of them for a long time. But I just think that it's a different style of game, and it's something to try out.
I think this game, some of the playtests, sorry to interrupt you, some of the playtests I've done, I've done playtests where I've fully written out the diary entries and gotten involved and all of that. I've also done playtests where I kept the diary entries incredibly short, just a quick summary of what happened. And you see, I did it because I was playtesting for balance. So I was playtesting, if I draw this card and make this decision and make this dice roll, like how many turns does it take to complete a game? How likely is each outcome? You know, are my dice roll figures at the right point where it's difficult but not impossible and it doesn't feel too frustrating? All of that balance stuff. But this game is absolutely playable with incredibly short diary entries if you did want to just, you know, keep the narrative in your head and know what's happening and play it out that way as if you were just doing a tarot spread for yourself and rolling some dice along with it.
Fantastic. And one thing, because we're coming up nearer to the end of our time on the podcast, but is there anything else you want to kind of let people know about the game, or any closing words, summary about it?
I think it's really good.
Great.
I think creators sometimes forget to sort of say that bit out loud, and I think it's kind of hard to say it, but I'm really proud of it. I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. I've really enjoyed playtesting it, so I really hope other people will enjoy it. And trying to think if there's anything else useful to know going into it. I think we've talked about the tone and the vibe and kind of how it's played. I think, I'm just really excited to see what people make of it.
Fab, me too. Well, the links is up on the screen or in the show notes of the podcast if you're listening. So go check out the crowdfunding campaign there, and there'll be more information on the page as well. So hopefully that'll be useful. Because the best way to support indie tabletop RPG creators is to buy their stuff. And then
to review it.
And then to review it as well. Although Kickstarter doesn't really have a review immediately, but
I know.
But Drama Llamas presumably does as well, which will be on the Buttonkin website, which I haven't put the link up to, but I will put it in the show notes.
It's just buttonkin.com. Nice and simple.
That should be nice and simple up on the screen there and in the show notes. So if you want to check out the other games, and we have got a Not D&D episode on Drama Llamas as well, if you're interested in playing group games with llamas. I have a final question for you though before you go, and that is if you have any other games that you'd like to recommend, and the rules are it can't be a game that you've made and it can't be D&D.
Oh, let's see. So the ones that I mentioned earlier when I was talking about things that I've played and highlights, those all stand. There's a particular indie game that I'm excited to play. Hang on, it's on my shelf. So this is like a small creator who just had a little stand. I need to remember what the name of the game studio is. Oh, Sea Light Studios. And it's this game, We Stalk the Hedgerows, which is this, you play goblins who are trying to find a new warren to live in. And it's kind of Animals of Farthing Wood, but with goblins. And it's beautiful. It's so beautifully done, so beautifully put together, and I'm really excited to play it, and just excited to shout out another indie creator who's doing great things. So that's my recommendation, just a little hidden gem.
I like it. I love that. That's a great recommendation. Thank you so much. I think that's all for this week. Thank you so much for coming on. I hope everything goes fantastic with the launch tomorrow. And hopefully have you back in another year or two when you've got another new project to bring out.
Hopefully.
All right. Well, that's all for now. Thank you very much for everyone that listened or came along and watched. And we will be back next week. Thank you very much, folks. Bye.